What looked like a quiet winter evening inside a luxury veterinary clinic turned dark in seconds when a wealthy man dragged a young volunteer into a locked treatment room and lashed out at her trembling puppy. He believed money, silence, and closed doors would protect him. What he didn't know was that a former Navy SEAL was watching, a German Shepherd was listening, and cameras never blink. From that moment on, power began to lose its grip, and truth stepped forward. Before we begin, tell us where you are watching from, and if this story touches your heart, please subscribe for more. Winter had settled fully over Pinehaven, a small mountain city folded into the northern ridges of Colorado. Snow had been falling since early evening, not in violent gusts, but in steady, deliberate flakes that softened edges and swallowed sound. Streetlights glowed faintly through the haze, their reflections stretching across frozen sidewalks like blurred memories. The cold pressed inward, making every building feel like an island of warmth surrounded by silence. The Silver Pine Veterinary Center rose at the edge of town with clean lines of stone and glass, modern and understated, designed to signal both care and status. Its parking lot was dotted with luxury SUVs dusted in snow, engines still ticking faintly from recent arrivals. Inside, heat hummed through the floors, and the air smelled faintly of antiseptic mixed with cedar oil. Everything was polished. Everything was controlled. Ethan Cross stepped through the automatic doors, brushing snow from the shoulders of his dark winter jacket. He moved with the quiet economy of someone accustomed to harsher environments. Tall, broad-shouldered, young, but carrying a stillness that came from years of discipline rather than age. His face was clean-shaven, his jaw set naturally firm, not tense. Short, dark hair was trimmed close, practical, unchanged from the habits of military life. At his side walked Ranger, a full-grown German Shepherd with a powerful chest and alert amber eyes. His coat was thick and well-kept, but his movement carried a slight restraint, a carefulness in the way he placed his back leg. The injury was old, ligament damage sustained during Ethan's final deployment, but winter had a way of waking what time tried to bury. Ethan paused just inside the lobby, allowing Ranger a moment to adjust from the cold. He knelt briefly, resting a gloved hand along the dog's shoulder and down the injured leg, feeling for stiffness. Ranger leaned subtly into the touch, calm, trusting, his tail low but relaxed. "Almost done," Ethan said quietly. His voice was low, steady, not indulgent, reassuring in a way Ranger understood. The waiting area was hushed. Leather chairs lined the walls, occupied by a handful of clients dressed in tailored coats and muted colors. Small, groomed animals rested in designer carriers at their owners' feet. Conversations were kept deliberately soft, as if volume itself were considered impolite. This was not a place where scenes were made. Ethan signed in at the front desk. The receptionist glanced at Ranger's size, hesitated for half a second, then forced a professional smile. Ethan took a seat near the far wall, positioning Ranger beside him with practiced ease, keeping the leash loose but controlled. For several minutes, nothing happened. The hum of heating vents, the distant clink of metal from somewhere deeper in the building, snow sliding softly against glass. Then Ranger's ears lifted. Ethan noticed instantly. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Ranger's posture shifted, muscles along his back tightening, head angling toward the rear hallway that led to the treatment wing. The glass doors there were frosted for privacy, allowing only vague silhouettes to pass through light. A low sound formed in Ranger's chest. Not a bark, a warning. Ethan's hand stilled on the leash. "Easy," he murmured. Not a command, an acknowledgement. Ranger did not relax. Instead, he rose to his feet, body angled forward, gaze fixed beyond the glass. A sharp bark broke the quiet of the waiting room, cutting through the controlled calm like a snapped wire. Several heads turned. A woman near the window frowned, pulling her small dog closer. Someone sighed in irritation. The receptionist looked up, annoyance flickering across her face. "Sir, you'll need to—" Ethan didn't answer. He was already standing. Years of training overrode social instinct. When Ranger reacted like this, it wasn't noise. It was information. Ethan followed Ranger's line of sight to the frosted glass. Movement shifted behind it. Shadows passing close together, stopping, starting again. The silhouettes were too near, too tense. He stepped closer, slowly, deliberately, careful not to escalate the moment. Ranger barked once more, then went silent, holding his ground. Through the glass, the scene resolved just enough. A young woman stood near the wall of a treatment room, her outline partially obscured by equipment. She was slight, wrapped in a thin volunteer jacket that hung loose on her frame. Dark hair was pulled back in a messy tie, strands falling free around her face. Even through the glass, Ethan could see the stiffness in her posture, the way her shoulders were drawn inward. She clutched a small puppy to her chest. The dog was young, underweight, its body trembling so hard it seemed to vibrate against her arms. In front of her stood a man. Cooper Hale had the easy confidence of someone who had never been told no. Tall, athletic in a polished way, his coat tailored perfectly to his frame. His hair was styled with deliberate carelessness. Even through the glass, his irritation was visible in the sharpness of his gestures, the way he occupied space without invitation. Beside him stood Vanessa Clark, elegant and composed, wrapped in a sleek winter coat that spoke of expense without needing labels. Her posture was relaxed, arms crossed loosely, her expression cool, observant, faintly amused. Their voices carried faintly through the glass, low enough to remain private, sharp enough to carry intent. "You call this trained?" Cooper said, gesturing sharply toward the puppy. "It starts barking the moment my cat walks in." Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. The mention of a cat clarified something. He glanced briefly toward the waiting area entrance, where a luxury carrier sat near Cooper's seat. A glimpse of pale fur through its mesh, unmoving now. The woman tightened her grip on the puppy. "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice shook. "He's just scared. He came from a bad situation. He didn't mean—" Vanessa let out a quiet laugh, not warm, not surprised. "If you can't control it," she said lightly, "maybe you shouldn't be here at all." Something cold settled in Ethan's chest. Ranger shifted again, planting himself firmly at Ethan's side, body rigid. He did not bark this time. He didn't need to. Ethan stayed where he was. He watched. He noticed what others didn't, the way the young woman, Lila Monroe, though he didn't yet know her name, was pinned not by hands, but by proximity. How Cooper stood just close enough to be threatening without touching. How Vanessa angled herself subtly toward the doorway, casual but controlling. How no staff member appeared, despite the raised voices. Ethan scanned the waiting room. People had already returned to their phones, their quiet conversations. No one wanted involvement. Not here. Not with people like that. Money pressed down on the space like gravity. A memory surfaced unbidden. A narrow road overseas. Heat shimmering in the distance. Ranger stopping short, refusing to advance. Ethan hesitating, just long enough to doubt instinct. The explosion that followed had been loud enough to erase sound entirely. A voice echoed in his mind, a lesson drilled into him long before medals or discharge papers. Dogs don't react without reason. They react to what humans haven't processed yet. Ethan exhaled slowly. This wasn't about the cat. Through the glass, Cooper leaned closer, his hand lifting in a sharp, impatient gesture. Not a strike. Not yet. But enough. Lila flinched instinctively, curling around the puppy as if shielding it with her own body. Ranger released a single, deep growl. Heads turned again. This time the receptionist hesitated before speaking. Her eyes flicked toward the silhouettes behind the glass, then back to Ethan and the dog. Uncertainty crept into her expression. Ethan felt the shift. This wasn't fear anymore. It was recognition. He tightened his grip on the leash, eyes never leaving the scene beyond the glass. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rush forward. But he didn't sit back down either. Whatever was happening behind that door had crossed a line, even if no one else wanted to name it. Ranger's bark had not come from aggression. It had come from warning. And Ethan had learned the hard way what happened when warnings were ignored. The hallway beyond the waiting area narrowed into a quieter corridor, the kind designed to separate procedure from perception. Frosted glass panels lined the walls, their muted glow softening everything they concealed. Cooper Hale moved first, his stride decisive, already assuming compliance. His hand closed around the edge of a rolling cart and pushed it aside as if the space belonged to him. "Let's take care of this privately," he said, his tone clipped and confident. Lila Monroe hesitated for a fraction of a second, long enough for fear to show, short enough to be mistaken for indecision. She held the puppy closer, its small body pressed against her chest, trembling so hard it rattled her breath. The animal's eyes were wide, unfocused, darting at shadows. Cooper didn't wait for agreement. He guided her forward with a firm motion of his arm, not touching her, but crowding her path until moving backward felt impossible. The door to a treatment room stood ajar. He pushed it open wider with his shoulder. Inside, the room was stark and clean. Steel counters, white tile, a metal examination table bolted to the floor. Overhead, lights hummed faintly. It was a place meant for healing, stripped of comfort by design. Vanessa Clark took her position outside the doorway with practiced ease. She rested one hand lightly against the doorframe, posture relaxed, expression neutral enough to be mistaken for courtesy. When a technician passed in the hall, a woman in her 30s with tired eyes and auburn hair tucked beneath a surgical cap. Vanessa smiled. "Everything's fine," she said softly. "We just need a moment." The technician slowed, glanced toward the room, then toward Cooper. Recognition flickered. So did calculation. She nodded once and continued down the hall without another word. The door clicked shut. Inside the room, the sound felt heavier. Cooper turned sharply. His irritation had sharpened into something colder now that there were no witnesses to perform for. "You think this is acceptable?" he demanded, gesturing toward the puppy. "Barking at my cat like that?" Lila shook her head, backing instinctively until her shoulder brushed the cabinet behind her. "He's scared," she said. "He was rescued last week. Loud sounds, sudden movement. It takes time." Cooper laughed once, short and humorless. "Time costs money," he replied, "and so does incompetence." He reached down and grabbed the metal crate positioned near the wall, the one meant for temporary holding. With a sharp kick, he sent it sliding across the tile. The impact rang out, loud and metallic, echoing in the small room. The puppy screamed. The sound was high and piercing, pure panic trapped in a fragile body. Lila reacted without thinking, dropping to her knees and lunging forward, arms wrapping around the crate as if she could absorb the shock herself. "Stop!" she cried. "Please, he's hurt!" Cooper's patience snapped. He shoved her away with one abrupt motion, not hard enough to leave a mark, but forceful enough to break her balance. Lila fell sideways, her knee striking the cold tile with a sharp crack that sent pain flaring up her leg. The breath left her in a gasp. She curled instinctively toward the crate, shielding it with her body. Cooper loomed over her, shadows stretching long beneath the overhead lights. "You want to keep working in this field?" he said quietly. "Then you forget this happened." His eyes were flat now, calculating. "Make noise," he continued, "and you'll never get another placement. I'll make sure of it." The words landed heavier than the shove. Lila's hand shook as she reached for the crate, checking the puppy through the bars. The dog whimpered softly, curling inward, eyes squeezed shut. Outside the room, Ranger strained against the leash. The German shepherd's body was rigid now, muscles bunched tight beneath his coat. His ears were pinned forward, tail stiff. A low, constant growl vibrated through his chest, resonating against Ethan Cross's grip on the leash. Ethan had shifted closer to the hallway entrance without raising his voice or drawing attention. His posture remained relaxed, but every line of his body was alert. He watched the door, watched the subtle way Vanessa positioned herself between the corridor and anyone who might approach. Ranger pulled again. Ethan tightened his hand slightly, grounding the dog without forcing him down. "Hold," he murmured. Ranger didn't stop growling. Ethan began counting without realizing it, a habit born in places where hesitation had consequences. 1, 2, 3. Each second measured, weighed, each second another chance for a situation to tip beyond recovery. His eyes flicked briefly upward. A small black dome sat recessed in the corner of the ceiling. A hallway camera. Its red indicator light glowed steady. Good. That mattered. Inside the room, Lila struggled to her feet, favoring her knee. Her breath came shallow, uneven. Cooper watched her with impatience, tapping his fingers once against the counter. Vanessa opened the door just enough to slip inside, then closed it again behind her. Her expression had hardened, the polite mask discarded now that the performance was unnecessary. "Don't be dramatic," she said to Lila, her voice cool. "You caused this." Lila stared at her, disbelief cutting through the pain. "I was helping," she whispered. Vanessa shrugged. "You should have known better." The puppy whimpered again, and Lila moved instinctively toward the crate. Cooper stepped into her path. "Enough," he said. "We're done here." Outside, Ranger's growl deepened, edging toward a bark. Ethan felt the tension coil tighter, like a wire pulled too far. Another memory surfaced uninvited. A dusty courtyard under a blinding sun. A civilian caught between raised voices. Ethan's hesitation. A fraction of a second spent assessing instead of acting. The sound of a body hitting the ground. The weight of knowing action delayed is action denied. He swallowed. "I'm not doing this again," he said under his breath. Ranger surged forward, the leash snapping taut. Heads turned in the waiting area. Vanessa glanced toward the door, irritation flashing across her face. "Sir," she called out, her tone sharpened, "you need to control your dog." Ethan didn't answer. He stepped closer to the doorway, positioning himself where the hallway narrowed. He didn't touch the door. He didn't raise his voice. But he didn't move away either. Inside the room, Cooper scoffed. "You hear that?" he said to Lila. "That's your fault, too." Lila closed her eyes for a moment, pain and fear mixing into something heavier. She wrapped her arms around the crate, making herself small, shielding the puppy with her body again. The door remained closed. The camera continued to record. And the silence in the corridor. Thick, deliberate, complicit. Pressed down on everyone who chose not to break it. Ethan Cross stopped at the front desk without breaking stride. The receptionist, Maribel Hayes, a woman in her late 20s with neat braids pulled into a low bun and a practiced, customer-facing calm, looked up, already prepared to recite policy. Her eyes flicked to Ranger, then to Ethan's face, and paused. "There's a safety concern," Ethan said. His voice was level, unraised, carrying the kind of certainty that didn't ask permission. "That treatment room needs to be opened." Maribel hesitated. The line of her mouth tightened. "Sir, those rooms are restricted." "I'm a former Navy SEAL," Ethan continued, offering the fact as information, not leverage. "And there's an animal and a staff member at risk behind that door." The words landed cleanly. No threat, no explanation beyond what was necessary. A beat passed, then another. Behind Maribel, a veterinary assistant. Caleb Moore, early 30s, lean with dark circles under his eyes and scrubs that had seen too many long shifts. had stopped mid-step. He followed Ethan's gaze toward the corridor. The low, constant vibration of Ranger's growl carried faintly through the space. Maribel swallowed. She reached for the access panel beneath the desk. Her fingers shook just enough to be noticeable. "Caleb," she said quietly, "get Dr. Feldman." Caleb nodded and moved faster than he had a moment earlier. The door release chimed softly. Ethan didn't rush. He walked toward the corridor at a measured pace, Ranger at his side, leash loose but ready. People in the waiting area watched now, some standing, some frozen in their seats, uncertain whether to intervene or retreat into the safety of not knowing. Vanessa Clark turned as the door unlocked. Her expression shifted instantly, polite irritation giving way to sharp annoyance. "This is unnecessary," she said, stepping forward. "You're causing a scene." Ethan didn't look at her. He opened the door. The room revealed itself all at once. Lila Monroe sat on the floor beside the wall, one knee bent awkwardly beneath her. Her face was pale, eyes glassy with pain and shock. Her arms were wrapped protectively around a small crate, fingers curled white-knuckled through the metal bars. Inside, the puppy lay pressed against the corner, breathing fast, a thin whine slipping from its throat. Cooper Hale stood a step away, shoulders squared, jaw tight. His hands were clenched at his sides, his posture aggressive in its stillness. Vanessa stood near the counter, one hand gripping the crate's handle as if ownership could be asserted through touch. For half a second, no one moved. Then Ranger advanced. The German shepherd stepped past Ethan, placing himself directly between Lila and Cooper. He didn't lunge. He didn't bark. He stood tall and solid, body angled, head lifted, eyes locked on Cooper's face. The space around him felt suddenly smaller, compressed by presence alone. "Control your dog," Cooper snapped, his voice echoing too loudly against the tile. This woman provoked him. She can't handle animals. "Enough," Ethan said. One word, calm, final. Cooper rounded on him. "You don't know what you're talking about. Ethan raised a hand, not toward Cooper, but toward Ranger. The dog held his position, muscles taut, gaze unbroken. Ethan spoke again, his tone unchanged. "Step back." Cooper laughed sharply. "Or what?" Ethan closed the distance in 2 smooth steps. He didn't grab Cooper. He placed one hand on Cooper's wrist, the other at the elbow, applying pressure in a precise, practiced motion. The move was clean and controlled, designed to immobilize without harm. Cooper gasped in surprise as his balance vanished and his arm rotated behind him, not enough to injure, enough to end resistance. "Don't," Ethan said quietly, close enough that only Cooper could hear. "Make this worse." Cooper struggled instinctively, then froze as Ranger's head shifted closer, eyes unblinking. The dog's breath was steady, controlled. Vanessa cried out, "You can't touch him. Do you know who he is?" Ethan didn't answer. Caleb appeared in the doorway, followed by Dr. Alan Feldman, a man in his 50s with silver hair and a posture worn thin by responsibility. Feldman took in the scene in a single glance. The woman on the floor, the puppy, the restrained man, the German shepherd holding the center of the room like a line drawn in ink. "What's going on?" Feldman demanded. Ethan spoke without turning. "She's injured. The animal's injured. He assaulted them." "That's a lie," Cooper barked. "She lost control of the dog." Ranger's gaze tightened. He didn't growl. He didn't need to. Feldman stepped closer to Lila, kneeling carefully. "Can you stand?" he asked gently. Lila shook her head, tears streaking silently down her cheeks. "My knee." Feldman nodded once. "Okay, stay still." Maribel hovered at the door now, phone in hand, her professional detachment cracked by concern. Around them, the weight in the room shifted. Staff who had looked away earlier now watched openly. Fear began to give way to recognition, to clarity. Vanessa backed toward the wall, color draining from her face. Ethan eased Cooper down onto the examination table, releasing pressure slowly, deliberately. Cooper slumped back, breathing hard, anger replaced by shock. "This isn't over," Cooper spat. Ethan met his eyes. "It is for tonight." Ranger remained planted, a silent sentinel. For the first time, money had no voice here. Red and blue lights washed the glass facade of Silver Pine Veterinary Center, their reflections sliding across the snow like restless shadows. The quiet mountain night did not break into chaos. It simply tightened, holding its breath as two patrol cars eased into the lot and stopped with deliberate precision. Inside, the building shifted from shock to order. Officer Daniel Ruiz entered first, a man in his early 40s with a stocky build, close-cropped black hair, and a face shaped by years of calm decision-making. His partner, Officer Megan O'Neill, followed, taller, leaner, auburn hair pulled into a tight ponytail beneath her cap, eyes sharp and attentive. Neither raised their voices. They didn't need to. They took in the room in seconds. Lila sat on the floor near the wall, her knee bent at an angle that made Megan's jaw tighten. The puppy lay curled inside the crate beside her, chest fluttering rapidly. Cooper stood rigid near the examination table, jaw clenched, hands flexing as if looking for something to grip. Vanessa hovered by the counter, arms crossed tightly now, the confident composure from earlier replaced by something brittle. Ranger lay down beside Lila without being told, his body angled protectively, chin resting on his paws. He didn't look at the officers. His eyes never left Cooper. Ethan stepped forward, hands visible, posture open but grounded. "I'm the reporting witness," he said. "Former Navy SEAL. I intervened to prevent further harm." Ruiz nodded once. "We'll get to you." Megan knelt beside Lila. "Ma'am, I'm Officer O'Neill. Can you tell me where you're hurt?" "My knee," Lila said softly. Her voice shook, but she met Megan's eyes. "And my shoulder." Megan assessed quickly, gentle but precise. "We'll get you checked. You did the right thing staying still." Across the room, Cooper cleared his throat. "This is being blown out of proportion," he said. "She lost control of the dog. There was no assault." Vanessa nodded too quickly. "Exactly. It was chaotic. Accidents happen." Ruiz didn't respond. He turned to Dr. Feldman. "Cameras?" Feldman gestured toward the hallway. "All active. We've already pulled the timestamps." A technician rolled a cart with a monitor into the room. The screen flickered to life, blue progress bar inching forward. No one spoke as the footage loaded. The first clip played without sound. The image showed the corridor, empty at first, then Cooper and Lila entering the treatment room. Vanessa followed. The door closed. The angle shifted to an interior camera. Cooper's foot came into frame, hard, abrupt, striking the metal crate. The crate slid. The puppy recoiled, its body jolting. Vanessa's hand moved to the door. She turned the lock. Lila rushed forward. Cooper shoved her aside. She fell, her knee striking the tile. The puppy screamed. The video ended. Silence settled over the room, heavy and absolute. Vanessa's face drained of color. "That?" She started, then stopped. "That doesn't show everything." Ruiz turned to her. "It shows enough." Cooper's phone vibrated in his hand. He looked down, then away, then brought it to his ear. "I need my attorney," he said sharply, already turning toward the wall. "Now?" Ruiz raised a hand. "You can make your call in a minute." "This is harassment," Cooper snapped. "Do you know who my family is?" Ruiz's expression didn't change. "I know what the video shows." Megan helped Lila onto a chair. "You mentioned being threatened," she said gently. "Can you explain?" Lila took a breath that shook all the way through her. "He told me if I said anything I'd never work in veterinary medicine again, that he'd make sure no clinic would take me." Vanessa interjected, voice rising. "He didn't mean it like that." Lila looked at her. You heard him." Vanessa's eyes flicked away. Ethan stood a few steps back, hands clasped loosely in front of him. When Ruiz approached, Ethan spoke with the same measured tone he'd used all night. "I'll give a full statement," he said. "Chronological. Observations only." Ruiz nodded. "Go ahead." Ethan recounted the events without embellishment. Ranger's behavior, the locked door, the raised voices, the intervention. He described positions, distances, timing. No anger, no commentary. As he spoke, a memory surfaced uninvited. Briefings where truth was shaved thin to fit narratives. After-action reports rewritten to soften consequences. Ethan had left the service not because of the work, but because of what happened when truth became negotiable. He finished and fell silent. The puppy whimpered softly. "A veterinary nurse?" Hannah Lee, petite, dark-haired, eyes gentle but focused, knelt to examine it. She moved carefully, murmuring reassurance as she checked for injury. Ranger inched closer, placing his body between Hannah and Cooper without aggression, a quiet boundary drawn in fur and muscle. Hannah looked up at Ethan. "He'll need imaging, but he's stable." Ethan nodded once. Cooper paced now, agitation replacing confidence. "This is ridiculous," he muttered, thumb jabbing at his phone. "I'm calling my lawyer." Vanessa's composure fractured. "You did this," she hissed at him under her breath. "You said we could handle it." Cooper shot her a glare. "Don't start." Megan documented quietly, her pen steady. Ruiz conferred with Feldman, voices low, professional. No one raised their voice. They didn't need to. The truth had already spoken. Outside, snow continued to fall, indifferent to wealth and status. Inside, the air felt clearer, lighter, not because the damage was undone, but because it was finally seen. Ranger lay beside Lila, unmoving, a constant presence. The puppy's breathing slowed as Hannah worked. Ethan watched without stepping in. His role here was finished. For once, the truth didn't need defending. It only needed witnesses. Snow returned to Pine Haven with a gentler rhythm, the kind that softened rather than silenced. The storm that had pressed against the town earlier in the week had passed, leaving streets dusted clean and the sky pale and open. Morning light caught on the mountains and spilled into the valley, turning cold air into something almost welcoming. Cooper Hale stood outside the courthouse in a charcoal coat that no longer fit the moment. His shoulders sagged beneath it, the tailored confidence stripped away. When the officers guided him toward the vehicle, cameras flashed without ceremony. There were no shouted questions, no dramatic resistance, just the quiet certainty of consequence. The charges were read plainly: assault, animal cruelty, intimidation of a volunteer. The words traveled fast through the town. By afternoon, the Hale family name, once stitched onto donor plaques and gala programs, had been removed from the Silver Pine website and several community boards. Money had not vanished, but influence had. Inside the courthouse, Assistant District Attorney Rachel Kim, early 30s, sharp-eyed, hair cut to a practical length, organized files with steady precision. Her demeanor was calm, methodical. She didn't raise her voice when addressing the room. She didn't need to. Evidence had already spoken for her. She signed the final request for remand and handed it off with a nod that meant the work would continue, properly and without shortcuts. Vanessa Clark waited in a separate corridor, arms folded tight against herself, composure cracking into something brittle. Her statement had shifted 3 times before noon. Each revision placed more distance between herself and Cooper. Investigators noted the inconsistency without comment. When the paperwork landed, the language was measured and unavoidable. Accessory, obstruction, participation. Vanessa read it twice, lips pressed thin, then lowered her eyes. The silence around her was not cruel. It was final. Back at Silver Pine Veterinary Center, the building felt different. The glass still gleamed, The floors still shone, but the air had changed. Inspectors arrived with clipboards and quiet authority. Dr. Elaine Porter, a veterinarian with decades of experience and a reputation for uncompromising ethics, stepped into the role of interim director by week's end. She was tall, silver-haired, and carried herself with the steadiness of someone who did not bend easily. She walked the halls, spoke with staff individually, and listened longer than she talked. Procedures were revised, training updated. The doors to the treatment wing no longer felt like barriers. They felt like boundaries that existed to protect. Lila Monroe sat at a small table near the window, sunlight warming the edge of her sleeve. Her knee was healing. Bruising faded to a yellow shadow, but the tremor in her hands had slowed. When Dr. Porter called her name, Lila rose carefully and stepped forward. The offer letter was simple: a scholarship funded by a new community trust, covering tuition and placement support. No conditions beyond continued study and a commitment to patient welfare. Lila read it once, then again, tears blurring the words into light. "Are you sure?" she asked softly. "Doctor," Porter smiled, the corners of her eyes creasing, "we're overdue for doing things right." Lila signed with a steady hand. The puppy, now named Ash for the dark streak along his back, tugged gently at the leash, tail thumping in an uneven rhythm. He was stronger now, appetite back, eyes bright with curiosity rather than fear. When Lila knelt, Ash leaned into her, all trust and warmth. The adoption papers were brief. The moment was not. Across town, a renovated warehouse near the river opened its doors quietly. The sign outside read, "Northridge K9 Recovery and Training," letters modest and unadorned. Inside, the space was open and clean, sunlight spilling across padded floors and obstacle courses built with care rather than spectacle. Ethan Cross stood near the center, hands in his jacket pockets, watching as volunteers moved through orientation. He didn't give a speech. He explained expectations, safety, respect, patience. His voice was even, unhurried. The words carried weight because they were sparse. Ranger trotted ahead, posture confident, eyes scanning. He paused beside a nervous shepherd mix, lowered his head, and waited. The other dog's breathing slowed. Ranger remained still until the tension passed, then moved on. It wasn't dominance. It was leadership. A woman named Marisol Vega, mid-40s with kind eyes and a clipboard tucked under her arm, observed from the edge of the mat. She'd spent years in animal welfare and spoke with quiet conviction. "He reads them before they read themselves," she said. Ethan nodded once. "He knows what fear sounds like." Word spread, not through headlines, but through results. Dogs that flinched learned to stand. Dogs that hid learned to step forward. Veterans volunteered alongside students, shared space without pressure. The work didn't erase trauma. It made room for it to heal. On a clear afternoon, Lila arrived with Ash bundled against the cold. She paused at the doorway, taking in the space. Ranger noticed first and approached, tail level, ears relaxed. Ash wagged, tentative but eager. Ethan met them halfway. "You're right on time." They walked together onto the mat. Ranger set the pace, Ash following with a bounce that grew steadier with each step. Lila's shoulders loosened. She laughed. A small sound, surprised by itself. Outside, snow began to fall again, light and unhurried. The four of them stepped out into it as the sun dipped low. Ethan and Ranger side by side, Lila with Ash trotting ahead, leaving a trail of small prints that filled quickly behind them. No one rushed. No one looked back. The winter held its breath, then let go. Sometimes the loudest cruelty hides behind quiet rooms, polished surfaces, and people who believe power will protect them. This story reminds us that harm doesn't always arrive screaming. It often arrives wrapped in silence, waiting for everyone to look away. In everyday life, we may not face moments as dramatic, but we all recognize that pause when something feels wrong. A voice raised behind closed doors, fear in someone's eyes, an animal flinching for no clear reason. Choosing to notice, to speak, or simply to stand present can change the direction of a life. Courage doesn't always look like confrontation. Sometimes it looks like discipline, restraint, and the refusal to let truth be reshaped. When evidence is honored and voices are believed, healing becomes possible, not just for victims, but for communities. If this story moved you, share it with someone who believes that kindness and accountability still matter. Let us know in the comments what part stayed with you the most, or where you're watching from today. And if you believe that no act of cruelty should ever be ignored, consider subscribing to the channel, so more stories like this can be told and more people can be reminded that silence is a choice, but courage is one we can all make.